Page 41 is just giving you the anatomy of a circle. Again, this is mostly vocabulary, but let's go through here. The first line I want to start with is diameter. So that is the blue line that runs all the way across the circle. Here is diameter. So let's get the definition of diameter down here. Diameter is a straight line. It's not really a line. Let's say a straight segment that goes across a circle. And here's the key part: through the center. So we need to mark the center of this circle with a point. So I'm going to have to erase this out for just a second. And let's put a point. I'm going to use black ink here. Just put yourself a big old point right here. We're going to call that point C for center. Okay. So diameter goes across the circle through the center. That is key. That green line is not a diameter because it doesn't go through the center. The diameter will always cut the circle in half. Now, the diameter is not always horizontal. For example, let's do two circles. We'll just make them both the same, so we know they're exactly the same. I love circles. Okay, a diameter, let's show the center. This is pretty important, that the center is a point. The diameter must pass through that point. So if you wanted to do it this way, you could. You could do it this way. As long as it's passing through that center point, it is a true diameter. So it doesn't have to be horizontal. It just has to pass through the center, and it has to touch the outer edges of the circle. Okay. Let's look next at radius, which I have shown you here in red. But let me zoom in on it so you can see this is the red line. Just going to call that radius. And in a math problem, that is the letter R. Diameter will be the letter D. No surprise there. So diameter is the lowercase d, radius is R. Radius is always half the diameter because of its definition. Radius is a segment that goes from the center point to a point on the circle. And I believe a picture is 1,000 words, so let me draw it in right here. Draw a circle. You always need to see that center point when you're dealing with a circle picture. And a radius is half the diameter. This could be in any direction. These are all radii, and I'll write that for you. So 1 is a radius, or in this situation, I've drawn 4 radii. And that doesn't look right. Let me check the spelling on radii, because spelling is not my cup of tea. Radii. Yep, it is correct. But it sure looks funny, doesn't it? Okay. And you may be thinking, why in the world do I need to know this? Well, if you're a nurse and you're reading an x-ray, you might be interested to know the radius of a certain bone or the diameter of a certain wound. So these are important terms, even if math is not your cup of tea. Radius is always half the diameter. Or you could write it as the diameter is 2 of the radii, 2r. So for example, let me just be sure, because when you get into formulas, you need to know this. If you're dealing with a circle, I always taught my students to draw themselves a box. And the reason for that is so these don't get mixed into your problem somehow. Put your R in there and your D in there, and the problem will give you one of them. So say it's 20 inches for the diameter. I know that the radius is always half that. So before you try to solve a circle problem, you want to know R and D, because they're easy to get flip-flopped. All right, let's look at this green line. This is one that you probably will not hear a lot of, but I still want you to know what it's called. It's called a chord. A diameter is a chord. It's just a chord that passes through center. A chord is a segment that goes across a circle. A diameter will be the largest chord, the longest chord that you can have. For example, if you look at this one up here, I'm going to put some points on here just so you can see. Let me use black so you can really see what I'm doing. So here is a point, here is a point. That makes a segment. This chord is not a diameter, but it does go across the circle. You can see that the chord is smaller than the diameter because it's not passing through center. The center is going to be the widest point of the circle, or the diameter is going to be the widest point of the circle. Okay, there's one more thing I want you to see on this diagram, and then one more term. The purple line is called the circumference. We don't find the perimeter of a circle. You can only find perimeter if there are angles. A circumference, let me back up. There are angles in this circle, but you can only find a perimeter if you have vertices, if you have corners on your polygon. A circumference is the distance around a circle. And there's a formula for circumference. There are actually two of them that I see quite often. The one that I use, circumference is 2 r. This is not what I use, I'm sorry. 2 pi r. So circumference is 2 times the constant pi times the radius. The one I use is circumference is pi times diameter. So either of those will let you find the circumference. Now let's talk about pi just a second. Pi is a mathematical constant. It's actually a Greek letter. Looks like that. It's spelled P-I, not P-I-E. And pi is literally constantly 22 over 7. It's that fraction. Now, most people don't like fractions, so they will use the decimal form. So let me show you where that comes from. You probably already know what it's going to be, but let's see. 7 into 22 goes 3 times, and that's 21. So let's add a 0 and bring it down and see if we can get this decimal to terminate. Now the point where I add the 0, I have to add a decimal. 7 into 10 is 1 time. That's 3. So let's add another 0. Now I happen to know that pi never terminates. No matter how long I did this, it would never ever terminate. So I'm going to take it one more step, meaning I'm going to add one more 0. 7 into 20 is 2 times 14, and this is going to continue on to infinity. But I have enough here to round to say that it is approximately 3.14. And you are safe to use that as your constant for pi. Pi is 3.14. If you like fractions, like I do, I tend to use 22 over 7 sometimes, but either of those will be fine. The thing you would want to remember if you were being extremely, extremely precise is that pi equals the fraction 22 over 7. And pi is approximately 3.14 because it's been rounded. So if you're using the decimal form, you will likely encounter rounding. But if you know the rounding rule, you'll be fine with that. So either of those will work for you. And just because we're on this page, let me give you the circumference of a circle. We already did that one. I use pi d. You can also use 2 pi r. And then the area of a circle will be pi times the radius squared. So it's very important that you know the difference between r and d.